Jam chain. What is it?
So we have all this land by virtue of creating this underlying machinery that Polkadot uses. This land that is enabled by this machinery, we've tiled over this land with concrete to make it ready for parachains, and we've built parachain buildings on the concrete. So there's no chance of having really trees on the land, for example, or grass or meadows or mountains or plain. Not so great if you want to allow other things to prosper. Jam is really a flexibility enhancement for Polkadot.
Welcome to the Sub-Zero in Bangkok edition of A Glass with Gav. So I searched for a Southeast Asian whiskey. Not that easy to find, but at least I found an East Asian one. It's Taiwan. Single malt Kavalan whiskey, Podium. So I haven't tried it yet myself. So I read about a Kavalan, and it has a faster distilling process. So instead of losing 2%, it loses 12%, which means that's why it needed to be more expensive.
We have dark gold with amber highlight, elegant floral note, green apple, cherry, grapes, and white pepper. Finish to be experienced with patience.
With patience. And it's 46%. So we'll try it neat.
Yeah.
Modest pour.
Not that modest. You'd be pretty lucky to get this in a pub. It is quite deep. This is a pretty brown whiskey. Smells pretty good.
I'm off alcohol at the moment, except for special occasions and acts of God. This is certainly a special occasion.
No, chin chin. Not bad.
Oh, it's nice.
Yeah.
It's pretty smooth.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit like an unpeated island scotch. I would say reminiscent of Boonhan. Not bad. Not bad.
So we're coming from Bangkok after the finish of the Sub-Zero conference, which is the Polkadot Developer Conference.
Yeah. And
very well attended. A lot of news in the conference, especially from you.
Well.
Core Jam, what is it?
Well, at the moment it's a research project. It will form a proposal for what Polkadot could become. And I mean, Polkadot's a decentralized network, as I emphasize to various people. It's not in any particular individual or organization's power to specify what Polkadot should become. But, it's something that, me and my team have been working on for some time. I think I opened the initial RFC, maybe 6 months ago, something like this. It's been progressing since then. And we, at the moment, we're obviously doing some experiments, we're writing some code, and we're trying to understand if this thing can work the way that we want it to work. But so far, we're quite optimistic.
Right. And this is just unveiled now. From what I saw from the presentations, it's 20 months away from anything possibly happening.
I mean, I think that was the upper limit, but sure.
Okay.
I mean, it could be, it could perhaps be a bit sooner. At its core, it's really just a simplification of the Polkadot protocol. In some sense, it slices the Polkadot protocol in half and moves half of it into user space, and then the other half stays as the core protocol.
Okay, and so that makes it simpler to build on it?
No. But what it does, you can think of it a bit like, so we have all this land, right? I'm going to go into a metaphor here, all right? So bear with me. All right. So we have all this land, and we've discovered this land by virtue of creating this underlying machinery that Polkadot uses. The machinery specifically is what Ethereum folks might call distributed availability. Again, what might be called in other ecosystems, secure optimistic rollups. I mean, Polkadot delivered a number of things, but at the sort of foundation level, like the machinery that Polkadot really runs on, that's what the machinery is. Basically, it's these two things. They're the sort of clever bits. If you imagine we've got this land that is enabled by this machinery, all this opportunity, what we have done so far is we've tiled over this land with concrete to make it ready for parachains, and we've built parachain buildings on the concrete. The problem is that the concrete only allows parachain buildings to be built on this land, and it turns out that other things can be built on this land as well, but they can't easily be built if we have concrete already down. Other things can maybe grow on the land, to carry the metaphor. So there's no chance of having really trees on the land, for example, or grass, or meadows, or mountains, or plains, or water features. It's all concrete, which is all very well when you want to build these parachain cities, but it's not so great if you want to allow other things to prosper. Now, the metaphor doesn't carry all that much farther than that, so I'm going to get too further into it. But what you can look upon as doing with Jam is essentially smashing through the concrete and saying, well, we will have the option of laying concrete.
So parachains remain.
Parachains remain.
Okay.
But there will be additional options that you can use Polkadot for. Now, you can think of it a little bit like Amazon. I mean, Amazon started off as a company that just sold books, right? Now, they had all this e-commerce stuff, but what did they use it for? They used it to sell books. That's all, right? Now, that happened for a few years until they got this sort of underlying nuts and bolts optimized. They could really sell books cheaper and faster and better than anyone else. And then once they did that, they brought in selling other things, and eventually the marketplace, and so forth and so forth. Well, it's a little bit like that, I think, with Polkadot. The initial use case is securing other blockchains, parachains. That's the sort of equivalent of selling books. But the equivalent to e-commerce is this kind of scalable, secure computation, the thing that actually secures the blockchains, but can secure all sorts of other things as well. And at the moment, just as Amazon only used e-commerce to sell books, despite it being possible to use it to sell all sorts of other things, we have only used this underlying, what's called availability and validity. This is the technical term for this underlying machinery. We've only used availability and validity to make parachains, but in fact they can be used for all sorts of things, or at least that's the theory. And we've got a couple of ideas about what other things that they could be used for, which I'm not that bothered, not too keen to
that's
go
the
into
research
right yet.
that's happening now,
Yeah.
and so that'll be already, arguably, in my opinion, not very arguably, the substrate / Polkadot SDK is probably the most performant, effective tech stack out there. And the reason I say there's evidence by others using it, right? Imitation is the highest form of flattery, but they're not necessarily connecting to the greater ecosystem. You're dedicated to open source, right? But open source allows for these things to happen. What's your view on that? Is it more like, oh, cool, or is it frustrating?
It's always nice when people use your stuff to build, interesting things that you want to see be built. At the end of the day, when you build something, it's so that other people will use it, and you don't generally. I think you can get into a very sort of depressing mindset if you disregard, or if you get upset about people building the wrong things on. Right,
of course. I guess more is like blockchain, and the future has to be open source and decentralized, right? And then, but that also introduces what people can do with open source things. Just copy it and not attribute, not connect back, not be additive. What do you think some steps might be to mitigate, if it's even necessary to mitigate? Maybe it's not even a thought.
I mean, there are computer languages out there, compilers, tool sets, operating systems even, and You know, they exist for people to use, and of course, some people, use them and alter them, and I don't think it's too much of a concern of the coders behind the operating system that some people happen to run that operating system when they're coding, Stuxnet or something. I mean, of course, it's like, much as with everyone, it's sad when people do, stuff that's broadly bad for humanity, but it's also not not something that I think is. I mean, realistically, should you be responsible for that as a creator? And in my mind, no. The answer is a resounding no.
Right. Okay. From that side, but more in the direction of somebody creates a competitor to Polkadot, for example, using the tech stack that went through lots of research and investment.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we what we're writing is open. It's we come from the West, which at least on paper is the free world. Now, of course, there are laws and there are various intellectual property laws, and in my mind, these do, by and large, more harm than good. So I'm not a big fan of wielding this IP hammer, wielding lawyers and lawsuits and so forth to try and fix things. I'm much more of the mind that just build something better. Because at the end of the day, if you're the builder, you're the one that people will go to if they want to use it. No one goes to the knockoff guy for support. And no one deploys the mine, something that they actually want to be, the high quality solution on the rip-off. This has come up in the past, people sort of saying, I'm going to do a competing relay chain. And it came up with Ethereum as well. There were people, I'm going to do a competing Ethereum.
Well, there are plenty of them. And there are plenty of competitive EVMs that some were, to some degree, successful.
Yeah, but the ones that ended up
compared to Ethereum.
Firstly, that, and secondly, the ones that actually gained some degree of market traction generally had some additional technology behind them, rather than just being a complete rip-off with a bit of added marketing. There's maybe one or two exceptions, but most of them fell by the wayside because Ethereum had the mind, what would you call it, the brain trust, right? Ethereum had all of the brains that were going to not just take this thing to where it is today, but drive it forward into the future. And at the end of the day, that's really what matters. If I fork an open source, well, maybe not on me, but if you fork an open source project, what does it mean? Does it mean that you now have a 50-50 share of the user set of that open source project? Absolutely not. Why not? Right. What's the difference? Well, there's no difference in the code. The difference is who's behind it, and the confidence that the users have that the people behind it will respond to their issues, fix their bugs, continue doing development, make useful features, etc., etc. And really, this is where the value add is. And what we make, what we build, we have to accept. A bit like musicians, we build it for free. I mean, basically. If you're a musician, you should be well aware that you're not going to get very much money for your production until either you spend the time doing concerts, in which case you're not paid for the music, you're paid for the time spending playing the music, or you get to become monopoly. Basically, you have the monopoly over a brand. Basically, a publisher sells the brand and enough people buy into the brand to some degree of kind of religiousness that you can now wield that monopoly. And at that point, you're going to be able to make some money. But up until that point, you're not going to make very much money. And it's sort of the same is true since open source. I mean, Bill Gates didn't like this, which is why Microsoft was famous for closed source for so long. You're not going to make very much money as an open source coder, but you know that what you're building is going to be good for the world because you're contributing to human knowledge. You know that it will be probably be most optimally used by the market, because any company that doesn't use it well when it can be used will be behind a competitor that does use it well when it can be used. And at the end of the day, you know that if what you're building is useful to people, you will make money because you will be an expert on it. But you will sell the expertise. You will sell the ability to drive the thing forward. But you're not going to necessarily sell those lines of code.
Right. Right. So for those that opt to just copy and do solo chains using the Polkadot SDK, they're missing all of the network effects. They're missing all of the upgrades. They're missing all of the future development, unless they have to keep copying that as well.
And then, do they have the expertise to keep copying it? This is the thing. Maintenance is no easy task. I don't know. I mean, I think for Polkadot, with Jam, one of the main things to do is to make it so stay flexible is an important mantra I have found for life. It's because I stayed flexible, I was able to, join in the Ethereum project, because I didn't have a 9 to 5 working at a bank making software. And I think at least until you see a no-brain thing that you can sort of bet the farm on, then you really, really, really have to follow that mantra. You really have to stay flexible. Jam is really a flexibility enhancement for Polkadot, and I say it is an enhancement. It's not a major pivot. It still will do parachains. It's still going to have substrate will still be used for parachains. They will still work in exactly the same way. But what it does is it opens up new possibilities, and there are some very interesting possibilities that mean that regardless of which stage of the evolution that this industry is in, Polkadot would be able to offer something compelling.